Today our subject will be sale of goods, and the statute we will be referring to is Sale of Goods Act 1957. So actually, this sale of goods, we actually are going to focus on contract. However, this contract focus on contract of sale, contract of selling and buying of goods. So we need to consider what actually is the definition of contract of sale. And under section 4, subsection 1 of this Sale of Goods Act, a contract of sale involves two things. One, it is of transfer of ownership of property in the goods. We are talking about transfer of ownership of property in the goods. We are not talking about the transfer of goods. So meaning, if there is no transfer of ownership or transfer in property of goods, that will not be considered as a contract of sale. Because under a contract of sale, there must be transfer of ownership or transfer of property in the goods. So if the good is not with the buyer, however, the ownership of the goods has already been transferred to the buyer, though the price of the goods had not been fully settled, it is already considered as a contract of sale, because the most important thing is the transfer of the property or the ownership of the said goods. And secondly, there must involve a money consideration. There must be a price attached to this contract. If the contract is not in the form of money consideration, however, is a form of barter system, exchange of goods, this will not be considered as a contract of sale. So under a contract of sale, there must be a price attached to it. And how actually a price is being determined under a contract of sale? A price can be determined either, number one, it is to be left by a third party. So example in Malaysia is with regards to this contract of sales with regards to control item like sugar. Who determines the price of sugar? Is the government. The government is the third party here. And secondly, the price can be determined by the cost of dealings. What does it mean by cost of dealings? So in the case of auction, how price is being determined? So in the case of auction, price is being determined through the highest bidder. So that will be the price under this contract of sale, because that is how the process is being done. And thirdly, when a buyer pays a reasonable price, what is this? This is the price which the buyer is willing to pay. So let's say Giant Supermarket sell an item 20 ringgit per item, and Tesco sell it at 21 ringgit. If the buyer is willing to pay 20 ringgit at Giant, that will be a reasonable price. And if the buyer is willing to go to Tesco and is willing to pay 21 ringgit, then that will be the reasonable price which the buyer is willing to pay. A contract of sale can be absolute or conditional. So if it's absolute, meaning there is no condition which is being attached to the contract of sale. However, if it's conditional, then meaning there is a condition which need to be fulfilled first. So if a buyer wanted to buy a cigarette, the buyer must reach 18 years old. Then only a buyer can buy a cigarette. So if a person wanted to enjoy at Genting Highland Resort, and they wanted to involve in this gaming, perjudian there, so that person cannot be a Muslim, because this is a condition for that kind of service. Okay, so meaning that contract have a condition which is being attached to the said contract. So as I told you just now, if this is a sale, then the property in the goods had already been transferred to the buyer. However, if this is only an agreement to sell under that situation, the property is not transferred to the buyer yet, because this situation involves goods which need to be delivered in future. So meaning the goods need to be manufactured. It needs to be produced first. So this agreement to sell, later on, it will become a sale. So that's why I draw an arrow here. When it becomes sale, when times elapse or the condition has been fulfilled by the seller and the property now can be transferred to the buyer. So this agreement to sell, if there is breach by buyer, why buyer breach? So may sue damages from the buyer. However, if there is breach by seller, the seller can sue damages from the buyer. The seller cannot sue for price. Why? Because property in the goods haven't been transferred to the buyer yet. However, if this is a sale, why is it the breach is only by the buyer? Because it's already a sale. The property in the goods had already been transferred to the buyer. So under the situation, of course, there is no breach on the part of the seller under the situation because it's already a sale. So when there is breach by buyer, meaning buyer did not pay for the price, the full purchase price of the said goods. And under the situation, of course, the seller can sue for the price. So what are the type of goods which is being covered by the Sale of Goods Act? So goods which is being covered by the Sale of Goods Act under Section 2, it includes all kinds of movable property. So meaning these goods can either be very small and the value also is very small, and up to the goods which is very expensive. So meaning if you bought a pant, so we can use this at the statute. If you wanted to buy an aeroplane, you can also use the same statute. As long as the item is movable. Selagi ianya boleh dialih-alihkan. It can be moved. And it includes stock and also share. Termasuk stock, termasuk saham. However, exclude claim in action. What is a claim in action? A claim in action is a court case, a summons which is being taken up by a parties. So this summons, this case which is already filed in court, so this case cannot use this Sale of Goods Act. If it wants to be transferred the case to somebody else, then you need to use some other law. So these goods comprise of two kinds of goods, existing goods and also future goods. Existing goods are the goods which owned or possessed by the seller, and this good can be of specific good or unascertained goods. So meaning this goods is already with the seller in his possession and belong to him, and this good is of specific goods or unascertained goods. What is a specific goods? Specific goods which is being identified and agreed upon by the buyer. Unascertained goods, these are goods which is not identified and not agreed by the buyer yet. So let's say I wanted to buy a Causeway product. Okay, so I ordered this Causeway product from the dealer. So I want to buy a lipstick. So Causeway have a lot of product in their warehouse. So all this product at the warehouse, it is existing goods and it is unascertained goods. Why unascertained? Because all the product is there and it's not identified by the buyer yet. The buyer did not know which one actually the buyer want to buy. So once I order my lipstick just now, okay, so I ordered a brown color lipstick. So this brown color lipstick is specific brown color lipstick, code 2349, let's say. So I want this code. So this is specific goods. So however, these specific goods, they have about 100 pieces of lipstick, brown color with this code. Okay? So this lipstick is not ascertained yet. It will become ascertained goods once the said lipstick is being identified and appropriated for me. So meaning what the dealer did, the dealer take it from the said place where it is being stored, put it aside. this is for me. This is the product which I ordered. So under the situation that specific goods which I have ordered now become a certain goods. Why? Because it is being appropriated for me. Telah diasingkan untuk saya. Okay, asalnya dia adalah barang yang khusus, saya order yang khusus, saya nak lipstick ni. Khusus. That lipstick. However, it's not appropriated yet, right? So once it's being appropriated, diasingkan, it become a certain goods. So what are actually future goods? So future goods, these are goods which need to be manufactured, which need to be produced. It does not exist yet. So the buyer ordered these goods and it will be manufactured according to what the buyer wants. So this is known as future goods, and under this situation, of course, it involves only agreement to sell. So now let us have a look at the formation of contract. So under this contract of sale, there is no special formalities which need to be followed by the seller and the buyer. As long as there is offer to buy, there is acceptance and there is price, this is a valid contract already. So that's why almost every day we involve in this contract of sale. You bought your breakfast, right? So you go to the store, you choose your item and you pay for the said item. No formalities, right? So that is a valid contract of sale because offer is there, acceptance is there, and price is there. So this is a valid contract of sale. However, both parties, the seller and the buyer, if they want to do it formally and they want to include inside the contract of sale any of these terms, can't. No problem, they can do that. So what they want to include? So maybe they wanted to state inside their contract the time of payment, okay, and also the delivery. So let's say the party said delivery need to be done immediately, however payment will be done in future, can. Or payment immediately, delivery is done in future, can't. Or maybe payment is need to be done through installment, however, the delivery will be done immediately. Or payment immediately, delivery is being done installment, through installment, can't. Any of these, combination of these, it is a valid contract of sale. It's up to both parties, the seller and the buyer. However, if there is no formalities and it's not provided anywhere as to how, the mode of payment and as to the mode of delivery, then under the situation, we take it that the delivery and payment will be done concurrently. Serentaklah sebab tidak diperuntukkan di mana-mana. Okay, so our next topic, since we have been discussing with regards to contract of sale, whether it need to be done formally or not. So this is terms of contract, terma contract. Then why we have term of contract? Because there is no formalities. Does it mean that when it's done formally, then only these terms of contract exist? No. This term of contract apply to all kind of contract of sale. So that's why this is known as the implied term. Sebab tu dikenali sebagai syarat tersirat. Okay? Because whether you do it orally or you do it formally, so this term of contract will still apply. So all these 8 terms will apply. Then where is actually these 8 terms? Where should actually we find these 8 terms? So these 8 terms is being provided inside the Sale of Goods Act. So these 8 terms actually is trying to protect the consumer, the buyer. So this is being provided by the statute. So this term, it can either be a condition or a warranty. What is the difference between the two? A condition is essential, is the most important part of the contract. So meaning, if there is a breach of condition, the contract can be repudiated. Kalau ada langkah syarat pertama ni, kontrak boleh diketepikan. However, if there is a breach of warranty, this is only collateral, sampingan sahaja. Meaning parties can only claim their damages. So if you bought a refrigerator and the refrigerator is not cold, this is a breach of condition. Because why we bought a refrigerator? Because we want it to be cold. We wanted to store our food inside there. However, if we bought a refrigerator, the refrigerator is cold, it's just that it's very dark inside, but something is wrong with the bulb. This is a breach of a warranty. Then under the situations, contract cannot be rescinded, contract tak boleh diketepikan, the buyer can only claim damages. Hanya boleh tuntut untuk dapat pampasan. So let us go on with all these 8 terms which has been provided by the statute, and let us have a look what is this all about. So number 1, this is implied term as to time. So time of payment actually is not essential under a contract of sale. What does it mean? So that's why if the buyer fails to pay on time, the seller cannot liquidate the contract because it's not essential, meaning it's not conditioned. However, with regards to other terms of time, this depends on the contract. If the contract says it's the essence of the contract, then it becomes a contract, then it becomes the essence of the contract. Time of delivery. So if we look at the case of Bush Corporation, it says here time of delivery is the essence of the contract. So what happened in this case? It involves this delivery of soya-based meal, whereby actually in this situation, before this soya meal is being uploaded to the ship, parties need to give notice, and there is delay in giving this notice, and God had actually times of delivery actually is the essence of the contract, and because of that, the contract is being repudiated because of that delay. Now secondly, implied term as to title. So is this a condition or a warranty? It depends. It depends. If this is a contract of sale, then it is an implied term that the seller must have a good title towards the said goods. Why? Because if this is a contract of sale, the seller need to transfer good title to the buyer. Why? Because title ownership need to be transferred to the buyer. So how to transfer ownership? If the seller does not have ownership, if the seller does not have title. Okay, so that's why under this situation, if this is a contract of sale, it is a condition that the seller must have good title. If the seller does not have good title, then under that situation, the buyer can set aside, can repudiate and rescind the said contract. However, if this is an agreement to sell, then at the time when this agreement to sell become a sale, at that time, the seller must have good title. So meaning before that, if the seller does not have good title, the agreement to sell is still valid. So what happened in Butterworth versus Kingsway Motor Limited? This case actually involves this contract of sale whereby the said vehicle is on hire purchase, and the said vehicle has been sold many times while it is still under hire purchase. And of course the court held that though later on the seller, who is the hirer, paid the full purchase price, however at the time when he entered the contract of sale, he does not have good title, and because of that, the buyer can rescind the said contract. Number 3, this is implied warranty. And as I told you just now, warranty is only a collateral to a contract, right? Meaning what the buyer can claim is only damages. Buyer cannot set aside the said contract. So this is implied warranty as to quiet possession. What does it mean? This means that the enjoyment of the goods by the buyer cannot be disturbed. So this is more than when the title is defective. It is more than that, for meaning, so later on, if let's say the enjoyment of the said goods is being disturbed, then under the situation, the buyer can claim actually damages from the seller. This is future disturbance, future enjoyment of the said goods. This is actually an assurance given by the law that as a buyer, if you buy goods, then you are entitled to enjoy the said goods without any disturbance. Let us have a look at the case of microbeads versus greenhouse road markings. So what happened in this situation is this: when the buyer bought this road marking machine, at that time there is no claim with regards to patent. 1 year later, a third party succeeded in their claim with regards to patent. So meaning now third party claiming that they are the owner of the design of this machine. And because of that, okay, the buyer now, to enable them to use the machine, they need to obtain license. And because of that, they are now claiming damages towards the said seller. So I'm going to go on with number 4. This is also warranty. Warranty meaning the buyer can only claim damages, cannot set aside the contract. So this is implied warranty, that the goods is free from encumbrances. So meaning, if buyer bought goods, the goods which has been bought by the buyer have to be free from any claim or any debt from third party. So if there is a claim attached to the goods, meaning there is still an encumbrances to the goods which haven't been settled by the seller. So this is what happened in Stick versus Edward, whereby the buyer bought this vehicle and actually the government tax haven't been settled yet. And if it is not settled by the buyer, then of course the vehicle will be seized by the government. Of course, under the situation, the buyer need to settle this tax, and now they are claiming damages towards the seller. So this is allowed under the law. Number 5, this is an implied condition. This is a condition. So meaning, if this has been breached, what can be done by the buyer? Buyer can be sued. Buyer bolehlah tetepikan kontrak. Implied conditions that the goods have to correspond with the description. So these are the types of goods whereby the buyer bought these goods by relying on the description of goods, meaning that the buyer did not see the goods, however the buyer may be based on the catalog, or buyer based on what the buyer saw inside the advertisement, maybe through the website lazada.com or Zalora, or maybe through advertisement on the TV. So meaning the buyer did not see the good personally. What the buyer see is only the description of goods which is being put there by the seller. So that's why we said that this is when goods is being bought through this description. So if this is how goods is being bought, then the good needs to correspond with the description which have been seen by the buyer. So if the description says this car is of 2 meter length and is of turquoise in color, once the buyer ordered the said goods and the buyer received the goods, it does not comply with the description. It's not turquoise, it's blue in color, and then it's not 2 meter in length, it's only 1.9 meter. Then under that situation, it does not correspond with the description, and the buyer can rescind the contract and return the said goods and claim back his money. So if the goods, not only through description, however through sample, then under that situation, it needs to correspond not only with description, however, it also must comply with the sample. So, an example of this kind of goods are cookies which is being sold before Hari Raya, for festive season. So they will allow the customer to taste the cookies. Kuih Raya, rasa dulu. Taste the cookies, and you saw the sample of the cookies. So when the customer receives the cookies, the Kuih Raya have to be similar with what they have tasted, with what they have seen. Not only to say that it have to comply with the description, however, it also have to be similar to the sample which have been seen by the buyer. So these goods which is been bought through descriptions, needs to comply with the description, as I told you just now, needs to comply with the sample, and this kind of goods apply to uncertain good or future goods. Uncertain goods meaning the goods is already in existence, it's just that it's not appropriate for the buyer yet, or future goods which will be prepared, like cookies just now, it need to be prepared for the buyer and also for specific goods. So if I bought something through the catalog, I bought a lipstick through this Causeway catalog, the goods is already there in the warehouse, however, the said goods have not been delivered to me. I ordered the goods, or it's a specific goods which ordered according to my description. So when can you say that actually buyer bought goods through description? So any of these three situations can be considered that buyer bought goods through description. Number one, if the buyer does not see the good yet, the buyer only relies on catalog. So that's what happened in one user's will. He bought the second-hand self-binder machine. This self-binder machine is being used for harvesting, okay, untuk menuai lah. So according to the seller, this machine is new the previous year, and it had only been used to harvest up to 50 acre or to 60 acre of land. However, actually, this machine, when it's been delivered to the customer, to the buyer, the machine is a very old machine. And under that situation, the customer can reject the machine, can rescind the contract, because it does not correspond with the description which has been provided by the seller. So the second situation, which applies to goods which have been seen by the buyer. So this is when the good is being displayed. If you wanted to buy a computer through a PC fair, you have seen the computer, right? So you choose the computer that you want. However, it will be delivered to you later on. So this also falls under goods which is being bought through description. And of course, the said goods which is being delivered to you not only need to comply with the description, it also need to comply with the specific thing which you have seen earlier. And thirdly, third situation, when goods actually have been selected and examined by the buyer. So if I bought these Mandarin oranges in a box, so during Chinese New Year, they sell a lot of this kind of oranges inside the box, right, in the supermarket. So I have chosen one box. The box stated there 30 oranges. When I took it back home, it only consists of 24 oranges. Meaning it does not correspond with the label, with the packaging of that said oranges. Then under the situation, I also can rescind the said contract because it does not comply with the description. So these two are the circumstances whereby we can say that the goods also does not correspond with the description. So firstly, if the discrepancies is very small, can or not a buyer reject the goods because it does not comply with the description? So take into account the case of Arcos Limited, whereby the client had ordered this stuff. Dia tempah satu kepingan papan yang melengkung stuff, and the difference is only few mm. Perbezaan tu kecil saja, few mm. And the buyer rejected the goods. Court had can't. Why? Because the description is very detailed. Because of that, the seller need to comply with that. And also, in the case of Moore and Company, what happened? The buyer ordered this canned fruit. So the buyer says that the canned fruit, so in the packaging need to contain certain amount of canned fruit. When they receive it, so it's not as ordered. So under that situation, the court held also it can be rejected. So what about, number two, what about if the description is in a general sense, it's not that detailed? So when can a buyer reject the said goods? So under the situation, of course, the discrepancies need to be a very considerable discrepancies, meaning there should be a very extensive, very vast discrepancy. Then only a buyer can reject the said goods. Like what happened in 1 versus week, as I mentioned to you earlier, it says that the machine is new the previous year. So, however, when they receive the said machine, the machine is a very old machine, meaning the difference is very big difference. So under that situation, the customer or the buyer can reject the said good. And implied terms number six, this is implied condition. Condition also. So when we say conditions, meaning the buyer can reject, can rescind the contract. So number 6, this is implied condition as to fitness for particular purpose. So if a buyer bought a product and the said product is not suitable for the purpose the buyer bought it, can the buyer then return back the goods? Let's say you bought a sports shoes from a supermarket, and then you actually wanted to use a sports shoe, you wanted to play badminton with that sports shoes, and actually it's not suitable. Your feet become swollen. Can you return that sports shoe? Cannot. Why? Because there is no such protection that if you bought a certain product and it's not suitable for that particular purpose, you can return it back. There is no such protection. So that's why we have the maxim caveat emptor. What does it mean, caveat emptor? Caveat emptor means let the buyer beware. So meaning as a buyer, as a customer, we need to be careful. You need to know what is the purpose you are buying this product and whether this product is suitable for that purpose or not. Because if it's not suitable, you are not going to be protected. You cannot return the said item and ask for a refund. That is a general rule. A general rule, a buyer need to be careful. However, this general rule have an exception to this. So under section 16(1) sub A, there is 4 exceptions. So meaning, if the buyer can prove that he falls under any one of these exceptions, then of course he can return the said goods. So let us discuss this exception one by one. So number 1, if the buyer had already made known to the seller why he is buying the said goods, what is the purpose he is buying the said goods, he disclosed to the seller. He told the seller, I wanted to buy the shoes because I want to play badminton. Then if it's not suitable, of course he can return the said goods. Then under the situation you'll be telling me that. So you went to the supermarket, you buy a toothpaste, you buy a detergent. What else do you buy? You buy a bunch of grape. Then you need to inform the counter, okay, I bought this toothpaste because I want to brush my teeth with this toothpaste, this detergent. I want to wash my clothes with this detergent. And if all the buyer is doing this, then it will be a very long queue. It will make life miserable, right? And because of that, actually, though you need to disclose the purpose why you are buying the product to be protected, only if the product has many purposes and your purposes is actually not the normal purpose. So if the product has only one purpose and you are only going to use it for that purpose, then you are covered. Don't worry. So everybody knows that a toothpaste is being used to brush your teeth. So under this situation, there is no need actually to inform that seller why you are buying toothpaste, because toothpaste has only one purpose. However, if you wanted to use that toothpaste for some other purpose, which is not normal. So let's say you wanted to use that toothpaste for your pimple. Okay? So you want to use that toothpaste because you heard that people say that toothpaste can cure your pimples. Then you need to disclose it to your seller. If not, you are not being protected. You cannot then tell the seller, now I'm returning this toothpaste because I use it for my pimples and it's not cured. So it's not suitable. Can you return it? Cannot, because you did not inform your seller. What is the reason you are buying that toothpaste? Because you have a special reason. If this is a special reason, of course, you need to tell the seller of your purpose. So let us have a look at the case of Griffith versus Peter Conway. This case involved this lady. She bought this coat, and actually she has a very sensitive skin. And when she wear this coat, she suffered rashes. Kena buang lah, sebab kulit tadi sensitive. Now she wanted to return the coat. Cannot. Why cannot? Because for normal people, they bought this coat, they will not suffer this problem. And she did not actually inform the seller that she is different from other people. And because of that, she is not protected. And number two, when actually a buyer will be protected, if the buyer can prove that the buyer relies on the skill and the expertise of the seller. So meaning when the buyer bought that product, he bought that product through the advice of the seller. Then the buyer will be protected. Let us have a look at the case of Carmelite here. So in the case of Carmelite, they ordered this propeller for their ship. They did give their description how big the propeller should be. However, they left it to the seller to decide the thickness of the propeller which is suitable for their ship. Kipas kapal, kan? Kipas kapal. And when they receive the propeller, it is not suitable for the ship. So court hard, they can return the said propeller and ask for a refund because they are actually depending on the skill and expertise of the seller. And number three, to be protected also, a buyer need to prove that they bought goods from a seller who sell this kind of description of goods. So meaning if you wanted to buy an electric appliances, let's say you wanted to buy electric kettle. So where did you buy an electric kettle? From an electric shop. And if it's not suitable, then you can return it back to the electric shop. Where do you buy a pen drive? You buy a pen drive from a computer shop. Okay? And if it's not suitable for that purpose, you can return it back. So if you bought, let's say this electric kettle or this pen drive from Giant supermarket, that is not suitable for the purpose which you bought it. Can you return it back? Cannot. Why? Because Giant supermarket is not a seller who sells that kind of description of goods. Giant supermarket sell all kinds of goods, right? So, what I'm trying to tell the student is that you have to make sure if you want to buy something, make sure you bought it from a seller, from a dealer which sell that kinds of goods. Okay? So if you wanted to buy a flour, you wanted to bake a cake, make sure you bought it from a seller which actually sell this kind of product. If not, you bought this flour and it's not suitable for your cake, can you return the said flour? Cannot. So let's have a look at the case of Ashington Pingris versus Christopher Hill. In this case, what happened, the buyer bought this feeding compound, makanan binatang, okay? And this is a new kind of feeding compound, and they feed it to their mink, binatang yang you ambil bulu buat coat, whereby you use this mink, I think their fur to make coats, right? So they feed it, this feeding compound to their mink, and then this animal dies. And they refuse to pay for the price of the feeding compound. Because it says that the said feeding compound is not suitable to feed their mink. And though the seller says this is the first time they're selling this product and they are unaware actually this product contains toxin, which is actually dangerous for animals, got hurt. Since you are a seller which sell this kind of product, then under that situation, the buyer can actually return the said product. And finally, number 4, to be protected. So a buyer, if a buyer bought a certain specific kind of product, then the buyer cannot demand for a special brand or special pattern of a product. So let's say you wanted to buy a phone, okay? You bought the phone from a phone shop. You are already protected under number 3, right? However, you are the one who requests for a Samsung Galaxy 7, let's say. And then suddenly you realize that that phone is not suitable. You wanted to make videos on that phone and it's not suitable. Can you return the said phone? Cannot. Why? Because you are the one who requests for that brand name. And that's why you are not protected under the law. So let us have a look at the case of Badri versus Marshall. So in Badri versus Marshall, the buyer request from the dealer, they wanted a car. He wanted a car which is suitable for touring. Dia nak guna untuk bersiar-siar kata ni. And the seller recommended him a Bugatti car. And then he realized that this car is not suitable for that touring. Tak sesuai kata Bugatti ni untuk bersiar-siar. And he wanted to rescind the contract and wanted to return the car. Court said, can't. Why can't? Just now I told you, if you are the one who requested for that brand, you are not protected. Because in this case, he did not ask for that brand. He asked for a car which is suitable for touring. It is the seller who recommended him this Bugatti car. Okay, let us go on with the next implied term under this Sale of Goods Act. Number 7, implied conditions that the goods is of merchantable quality. So to be protected under this number 7, buyer must buy goods from a seller who sells that kind of description of goods. So this is quite similar from what I have discussed with you under fitness for purpose just now. Okay? So if you did not buy the goods from a seller which sells that kind of description of goods, then you cannot be protected under this protection. So meaning, if you want to buy your pen drive, where should you buy your pen drive, student? From a computer shop. Okay? If you wanted to buy these electric appliances, then go to an electric shop. Then only you will be protected under this term. So however, if you have gone to a seller who sells that kind of description of goods, however, you conduct an examination. You examine first the goods. You have tested the pen drive, okay, and it's default. Can you return it back when you take it back home? Then only you realize the default. Can you return it back? Cannot. Why? Because you have already examined the goods. So to be protected, firstly, make sure you bought it from the right shop. Secondly, make sure you did not examine your goods. Once you examine it, dah periksa dah, tak boleh dah. Ya, tak boleh dilindungi di sini. So, must you inform the seller what is the purpose of buying the said goods? No need. Under this protection, no need. The requirement is only 2 requirements. First, bought it by description from. Secondly, seller we sell goods from that kind of description. What is actually merchantable quality? Kita bincang quality boleh dagang, quality boleh dagang. So what is actually merchantable quality? So merchantable quality, if an item is fit for the particular purpose which is being sold, then we say that it is of merchantable quality. So if the said item have only one purpose and is suitable for that purpose, it is considered as merchantable. However, if not fit for that purpose, if you bought a nasi lemak. So what is the purpose you bought nasi lemak? To be eaten, right? And it's not suitable to be eaten, it's rotten, then it will not be considered as merchantable. It's of unmerchantable quality. And of course you can reject the said goods. Okay? However, if the said item has many purposes, let's say you bought an umbrella. So umbrella can be used to protect you from the rain, and also can be used to protect you from the sunlight. However, your umbrella can only protect you from the rain. It cannot protect you from the sunlight because your umbrella is a transparent umbrella. Can you return the said umbrella? Cannot. Why? Because if the said goods have several purposes, ada banyak tujuan, as long as it's suitable for any of those purposes, then it is considered as merchantable quality already. Maka ia telah pun dianggap sesuai, ya, dan berada dalam keadaan kualiti boleh dagang. Okay, if you bought a shampoo, the shampoo says 7 in 1. So the shampoo acts as a conditioner, the shampoo acts for suitable for dandruff and extra. And when you bought your shampoo, it's not suitable for dandruff, it can only cleanse your hair. Can you return the shampoo? Cannot. Why? Because I said if it has many purposes, as long as it's suitable for any one of their purposes, then that shampoo is considered of merchantable quality already. So what happens, number 2? If the said goods is being sold under trade name or brand name, and you are the one who requested this brand, will you be protected here? Because just now under fitness for purpose, if the customer is the one who demand for that brand, then the customer will not be protected. What about merchantable quality? Will the customer be protected? Yes, under merchantable quality, the customer will still be protected. So let us have a look at the case of recent record. So in this case, the customer, the buyer requested for this fuel. The brand of the fuel is Implied. So they wanted to use this fuel to be burned at the fireplace. And however, because this fuel had already been contaminated, tercemar minyak ni, it caused explosion, menyebabkan meletup. And court held, actually, it is of unmerchantable quality. Tidak berada dalam keadaan quality boleh dagang. And they are protected, and of course they can claim, okay, a refund because of that explosion. And as I informed you just now, want to be protected under this term, make sure you don't examine first. Once you examine, then you lost that protection. So this is what happened in Tornet and Fear versus Beers and Son. They bought a barrel of glue, beli satu tonggam. They conduct a superficial examination. If they conduct the examination thoroughly, they would have realized the defect, but they did not do that. They only conduct a superficial examination of the said barrel of glue. But still they have lost this protection, the right to be protected under this term. So that's why I said, don't examine, to ensure that you are being protected. So we are discussing with regards to just now fitness for particular purpose. Then we were also discussing with regards to merchantable quality. How are we going to determine whether this product is fit for that purpose, whether this product is of merchantable quality or not? What is the guideline here? Okay, so this particular purpose and merchantable quality is based on custom, based on usage of trade. Ia bergantung kepada amalan, ia bergantung kepada amalan perniagaan. And this custom and this usage of trade, it needs to be reasonable, mestilah wajar, and it needs to be universally accepted, diterima pakai seantara dunia. And also it has to be certain and not unlawful, dan tak bolehlah bercanggah dengan undang-undang. Because maybe to others, the said product is of unmerchantable quality. So let's say the people, East Coast people in Terengganu and Kelantan, they consume budu. Budu is actually from rotten fish. Okay, so maybe to others this is rotten fish cannot be eaten. How can you say that is of merchantable quality? However, it's very well accepted by the people East Coast as something is merchantable. It's how it's being eaten that way. So under this situation, we say that though it's rotten, it's of merchantable quality. So the last one is sale by sample. So if the buyer wanted to be protected under this term, sale by sample, then the agreement must state there that this contract of sale is a sale by sample. Okay. It can be either expressly or impliedly shown that this is a sale by sample. Then only a client will be protected. And under a sale by sample, it is implied condition. Impliedly, meaning if this condition is not being fulfilled, of course, the customer can ask for a refund and reject the goods. Okay. Firstly, the bulk which is being received by the customer should correspond with the sample in quality, the sample which has been seen by the customer. Okay. And secondly, the customer also, the buyer, must be given an opportunity to compare the said goods, the said product he received with the product he has seen earlier, the sample which he has seen earlier. And thirdly, the said product which he received must be free from any defect, rendering it unmerchantable upon reasonable examination. And what is reasonable examination? According to the case of Godley vs. Berry, okay, this is through common sense, standards of everyday life. So what happened in that case? So a customer bought this catapult, beli listrik, this catapult broke. And actually the customer did conduct examinations earlier and court held the examination conducted by the customer actually is reasonable, because that's how a normal people conduct examination when they bought catapult. Okay, so our topic, the last topic under this implied term is the section 62 under the Sale of Goods Act. This section 62 is with regards this exclusion of the implied terms. Exclusion meaning parties wanted to be excluded from these 8 terms which I've discussed with you earlier. Either the buyer or the seller, they don't want to be bounded by the terms. Tak nak terikat lah dengan syarat-syarat yang saya ceritakan tadi, yang saya terangkan tadi. They don't want to be bounded by that, by those terms which I've discussed earlier. For a consumer, for the customer, for a buyer, of course buyer don't want to be excluded from this term, because this term actually is good for the buyer. Because if this term is not being complied, then buyer can rescind the contract and ask for a refund. And most of the time, it is the seller who makes use of section 62. It's the seller who don't want to be bounded by section 62. And once if a party to this contract of sale make use of section 62, meaning they don't want to be bounded by this term, then all the terms which I've discussed with you just now is of no use. So maybe you did not realize that most of the time the seller make use of this section 62, which is also known as the exemption clause. Dikenali sebagai klausul pengecualian. So if you bought item from a supermarket, then behind the receipt you saw these words, item sold is not returnable. So meaning, if you bought an item from that supermarket and it's defective, can you return it? Cannot. So meaning the seller is making use of section 62. Or when you go to Genting Highlands, behind your receipt, ticket, right, it's stated that you are using all these facilities at your own risk. So meaning if those facilities is defective, is of unmerchantable quality, and you are injured, can you sue the said company? You cannot. Because why? Because they have made use of Section 62. They wanted to be exempted under the law. Mereka nak dikecualikan, tak nak terikat. Okay? So this is known as the exemption clause. So what I want to tell you, students, is this. Though all these items is good, however, once the seller make use of Section 62, then all these items is useless. Okay? So most of the time, because of the power of bargaining is more on the seller, it is the seller who actually make use of Section 62. So our next topic under the sale of goods is transfer of title. We have this maxim which is known as nemo dat quod non habet rule. What does nemo dat quod non habet means? Nemo dat quod non habet means if a person does not have a good title, then the person cannot transfer a good title to others. So if I borrow a book from the library, the title of the books, the property in the books belong to the library. Can then I give this book to my daughter as her birthday present? Will my daughter receive a good title towards the said goods? Cannot. Why? Because the said books does not belong to me. I don't have a good title. So that's what nemo dat quod non habet rules. If a person does not have a good title, then that person cannot give a good title to others. So why actually we have this rule? So this rule is to protect ownership, to protect the owner of the said goods, so that the owner will not be deprived of the title of the goods. So if a thief stole something and then sell it off to somebody else, if not because of this rule, then this new buyer will receive the said goods and then the original owner will be deprived of ownership. So that's why we have this rule. So let us have a look at the case of Lim Chulai vs. Zeno Limited. So what happened in this case is this. So this Zeno Limited entered into a contract with one Malay man by the name of Ahmad. Ahmad actually have entered into a contract with PJ authorities to build culvert, and then they appoint Zeno. That's why they enter into a contract with Zeno as their subsidiary contractor, as a subcontract to build that culvert. So Zeno Limited then later on put all the material they needed to build the culvert at the site. However, the main contract between Ahmad and the PJ authorities is being rescinded by the PJ authorities, by Petaling Jaya authorities. And because of that now, Zeno Limited wanted to take back all the materials which they have put at the site. They wanted to take back all the culvert they have put there. Culvert gelung batu, gelung batu yang kita buat telaga tu, culvert dia panggil tu. So they wanted to take back the culvert which they have put at the site there. However, what happened actually, Ahmad had already sold that culvert to Lim Chulai. So once Zeno Limited wanted to take back all this culvert, those culverts had already been sold to Lim Chulai. However, what the court held? The court held Lim Chulai does not receive good title. Why? Because those culverts does not belong to Ahmad. Those culverts belong to Zeno Limited. So he need to return back those culverts to Zeno Limited because that belong to him. This is a general rule under the law, nemo dat quod non habet. And this general rule have an exception. What is the exception under this general rule? I am going to discuss with you with regards to these exceptions. We have 6 exceptions here under the general rule. Exceptions meaning these are the situations whereby if a buyer bought goods from a seller who does not have good title, and that buyer still have good title, when actually this situation happened, number one is because of estoppel. Estoppel from the word stop. Who is being estopped here? The original owner is being estopped from saying that this good is his. He does not allow the seller to dispose it. Kita halang siapa? Kita halang pemilik sebenar. Halang pemilik sebenar daripada menafikan dialah yang membenarkan barang yang ini dijual. You wanted to stop the original owner from saying that this is his and he does not allow it to be disposed of. So what we are trying to say that you actually allows the seller to dispose of the said goods. So let us have a look at the case of NZ Securities. So what happened in NZ Securities? This buyer bought a car. So he bought the car from Right Cars, and he issued a check to Right Cars. He told Right Cars, you hold on to this check until I can find a finance company who is willing to finance the said purchase. Beli kereta, bayar dengan cek, tapi dia bagi tahu, pegang dulu sampai saya dapat cari satu syarikat perbankan yang sanggup membiayai pembelian kereta ni. So meaning he does not allow Right Cars to bank in the check. Let him go and find a finance company who is willing to finance the said car. And then he approached NZ Securities. Okay, NZ Securities actually is willing to finance the said car. However, he told NZ Securities, it's okay, you can give me the check because actually I had already settled the payment of the car. So NZ Securities, to confirm, they call Right Cars. They ask Right Cars, is it true that the payment has been made? Okay, now the car belongs to this buyer, and Right Cars says yes, payment has been made. This car belongs to him. And then only NZ Securities now, what NZ Securities did, NZ Securities released the payment to the buyer. So now, when the check is now, the check that the buyer requested Right Cars to hold on, Right Cars now bank in the check and the money bounced. So what they did, they auctioned off the said car. So that's why they are being sued by NZ Securities. NZ Securities says now the car is really ours because we already made payment to the buyer. Okay, and court held here, Right Cars is liable. Why? Because NZ Securities did ask for confirmation just now. And when they asked for confirmation, Right Cars told them, yes, payment has been made, this car belongs to the buyer. Okay, so actually it's their fault there. And secondly, when the exception will apply, this is when the sale is being conducted by a mercantile agent. Dibuat oleh agen persaudaraan. Who is a mercantile agent? A dealer. If I bought a product from Causeway outlet, let's say, they are a dealer, right? So how do I know actually whether they have good title or not? So I will be protected. Or from an auctioneer. Okay? So you do not know actually whether the auctioneer have a right or not to sell the said goods, or from a broker. So all these people are actually mercantile agents, and of course the buyer will be protected provided, firstly, the person who sold, the mercantile agent who sold the said goods have possession of the goods, and secondly, the possession is the consent of the owner, and thirdly, disposition is being done in the ordinary course of business. And fourthly, of course, the buyer acts in good faith, meaning the buyer did not have any bad intention. He did not know that the mercantile agent have other agendas. Okay, then under that situation, of course, the buyer will be protected. And exception number 3, if a buyer bought the said goods from a joint owner. What is a joint owner? A joint owner when the goods have been owned by more than one party. So if I bought the books, the law books, so I bought the books with my friend Zarina. So the books belong to me and Zarina because we both of us contributed to buy the said books. Now the books is with me. It's in my possession, under my control, and I sell it to you. Will you gain a good title? Yes, you gain a good title, provided I have the possession of the said books. And secondly, you did not know you are good faith. As a buyer, you are good faith, and you did not know that, okay, my other partners, my joint owner did not consented to it. And number 4, when a buyer bought goods under a voidable contract. What is a voidable contract? We have done this under law of contract. Voidable contract is contract which is been tainted, meaning the free consent is been tainted. Tercemar dia punya kerelaan bebas because of fraud, because of misrepresentation, because of coercion, because of undue influence. So this type of contract is actually a voidable contract. However, as long as the contract haven't been rescinded yet by the aggrieved party, selagi tidak diketepikan, it's a valid contract. There is fraud involved, right? However, the other parties does not rescind the contract is still valid. So let's say if I buy a my vehicle from you, whereby fraud involved, or maybe undue influence involved, you jual mari, kita mari dengan saya, tapi mungkin saya tipu, ataupun mungkin adanya pengaruh yang tidak wajar. Saya gunakan kuasa saya sebagai lecturer, I'm using my power as a lecturer, and you sell that car to me. So that contract between you and me is a voidable contract. You can set it aside. You boleh ketepikan kontrak itu, kan? However, you did not set it aside. Will that contract be valid? That contract is still valid. And then what happened? Before you set it aside, I sell that my vehicle to my friend Fatima, let's say. So does Fatima receive a good title? Yes, she received a good title. Can you later on set aside, you rescind your contract with me and claim the car from Fatima? Cannot. Why? Because I have already sold that car to Fatima before you rescind the contract between you and me. So that is that falls under number 4. Number 5, this is a sale by a seller who is in possession of the said goods after sale. So this is the situation whereby, though the said goods had already been sold to the buyer, however the said goods is still with the seller. I bought the furniture, right, from Ahmed Furniture, let's say. So I did not take the furniture back home. I told the seller, Ahmed Furniture, send this furniture to my house this Saturday. Then I go back. I waited for the said furniture to be delivered to me on Saturday. After I go back, then there is another buyer who approached Ahmed Furniture, and they are willing to buy the said furniture at a higher price, and Ahmed Furniture sell off that furniture, whereby that furniture is actually mine, because I had already bought it. Under that situation, this new buyer, will the new buyer receive a good title? Yes, the new buyer receive a good title. So if you bought something, make sure you take it back home. Unless if it involves documents of title, and the documents of title, the title had already been transferred into your name, then under that situation, of course, nothing can be done by the seller. So if not, to be protected, so that they say goods is still yours, make sure you take it back home. Don't leave it with the seller, because after that, the seller can dispose it and sell it to other buyers. Okay? So I'm not saying that you cannot sue the seller. You can sue the seller only for damages. However, you cannot claim the furniture from the new buyer, because you want this furniture, because this furniture maybe is very rare. It's only one in this whole world. However, because you make a mistake, you left it with the seller now sell it off to other people. Okay? And lastly, the exception number 6, This is sale by a buyer who is in possession of the goods. Of course, you're trying to tell me, okay, of course, since the buyer had already bought the goods, of course the goods is the buyer. Of course the goods belongs to the buyer. This is a situation when, though this is a sale to the buyer, however the title is still with the seller. Why? Because maybe the purchase price has not been fully settled, and the agreement says until the purchase price had already been fully settled, the title is still with the seller. So mungkin perjanjiannya selagi tak habis bayar, hak milik adalah hak milik penjual. Okay, let's have a look at the case of Newton's of Remedies. So what happened in this case? A rook is a bad guy. He bought a car from the owner of the car. He used this worthless check. Gunakan cek yang tak laku lah, worthless check. Orang jahat beli kereta, dia gunakan cek yang tak laku. He bought this car, he used this worthless check, and of course, the owner of the car lodged a police report because this check is useless, right? However, before this bad guy, this rook can be captured, he sold off the said car to a new buyer at the marketplace. And this is a normal marketplace where car dealers sell car. So now the owner of the car, can the owner of the car take this car from this new buyer? Because that is his car, right? Cannot. God help, cannot. Why? Because it has been disposed of by the buyer who is in possession of that car, though the buyer does not have good title. Okay? So that's the 6 exceptions under the Nemo Dark Quad Non-Hubbard rule. So this is the final topic under sale of goods, the remedies of the seller, and after this we are going to discuss with regard to remedies of the buyer. So if there is a contract of sale and the buyer committed a breach, ada perjanjian jualan dan pembeli langgar perjanjian, what can be done by the seller then? So apa yang boleh dibuat oleh seller? What can be done by the seller? So that's why now I'm going to discuss with regard to the remedies of the seller. What can be done by the seller? So the seller have 2 remedies. The first one, the seller have the rights against the buyer, and secondly, seller have the rights against unpaid. The unpaid seller have the rights against the goods. Mula-mula hak terhadap pembeli, dan secondly hak terhadap barangan. However, this rights against the goods is if only the goods is still with the seller. If the good is no more with the seller, meaning the seller had already delivered the said goods, is already with the buyer, of course the seller cannot exercise his right. The seller only can exercise the right against the buyer. So when can you say that the buyer actually conducted a breach of contract? Okay, so A, this is under right of seller against the buyer when the buyer fails to take delivery of the goods. When can we say that the buyer fails to take delivery of the goods? So let's say there is already a contract of sale, meaning the buyer had already bought the goods from the seller. However, the buyer did not take the goods back home. He just left the goods there. He never asked the seller to deliver the goods. Maybe the buyer says, okay, I'm going to pick up these goods this weekend. However, the buyer fails to do that. It has been 2 months already. So we can say that failure of buyer to take delivery. So of course the seller need to incur expenses, right, in taking care of these goods. And because of that, the seller can claim what? The seller can claim reasonable charges, for taking care of the said goods and also custody of the said goods. And secondly, when a buyer fails to accept goods, when actually this situation will occur? This situation will occur if a seller send the goods to the buyer. The seller delivered the goods, had reached the address of the buyer. However, the buyer refused to accept the goods. Then under the situation, of course the seller can claim for the price of the goods if the price have not been settled yet, and whether the property and the goods have passed or not, the seller also can claim damages. Why? Because of course he have incurred costs because need to hire a lorry to send the said goods, right? Okay, maybe need to send through post laju, need to pay expenses for post laju because courier service, and because of that, the seller also can claim for damages. And thirdly, this is normal, this is most common, failure of buyer to pay for the said goods. So what can be done by the seller then? Of course, the seller can sue the buyer for price. He can sue the buyer for price, especially if the property of goods had already passed to the buyer and the price of the goods has not been settled, or if the payment need to be done within certain period of time and the buyer did not pay actually the price of the goods within certain period of time, then under that situation, seller can sue for the price of the said goods. This whether property has passed or not doesn't matter. And of course, apart from that, the seller also can sue for damages. So now we are going to look with regards to the right of unpaid seller against the goods. So just now we have just completed by looking at what can be done against the buyer. Now we are going to discuss what can be done against the goods if the goods is still in the possession of the seller. So if the said goods had already been delivered, of course this is not relevant anymore. So first of all, who is considered as an unpaid seller? Siapa yang dikatakan sebagai penjual yang belum dibayar? If the whole price have not been paid or there is no tender of payment, okay, the seller can be considered as an unpaid seller. Or if payment is being done through a check, through a bill of exchange, and then this bill of exchange is dishonored, dibuat balik check ditunda, meaning the seller does not receive the price of the goods, then under that situation, a seller can be considered as unpaid seller. So what actually these rights of unpaid seller against the goods? So the unpaid seller has three rights. The first right is the right of a lien. What is a lien? A lien is a right of a seller to detain the goods. Hak untuk menahan barang. So that's why I told you just now, this is the right which arises only if the good is still with the seller. So meaning now the seller is not going to sell the goods to the buyer. He's going to detain these goods. So this is known as a lien, because the said goods is still with him, is still at his shop. So he has this right. So this right, whether the property has passed or not, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not paid, he has this right. So when they have this right, if there is no stipulation as to credit, nowhere in the agreement said the said goods is being sold on credit basis, or if sold on credit, however the term of credit had expired, then he also can exercise this right. And thirdly, when the buyer becomes insolvent, meaning the buyer cannot afford to pay the said goods because he cannot afford to settle his debts, then of course the seller can exercise this right. What happens if part of the goods have been delivered? Can or not the seller exercise the right of a lien towards the part which has not been delivered? If that is the situation, it depends. If the part which has not been delivered, that is the part which has not been paid, then of course the seller can exercise a right to a lien. However, if that part which have not been delivered, that part have already been fully settled, of course we cannot exercise this right. When actually this right comes an end then? Why? If the goods have already been delivered to a carrier. So these goods are now is on its way already. It's inside the lorry. Or these goods is with the courier service that cannot exercise the lien. And secondly, when the buyer or the agent of the buyer had already obtained lawful possession of the goods, then of course the seller cannot exercise his right. Or number 3, if the seller himself waives his right. What does it mean? Meaning the seller himself agreed to the buyer that the buyer can sell the said goods to other buyer. Then under the situation, the seller will lose this right. So number 2, this is right of stoppage in transit. What is this right? Right of alienation is a right to detain goods which is with the seller. However, right of stoppage in transit, this is also a right to stop the goods from reaching the buyer. However, this right is being exercised when the good is on its way to the buyer. So meaning the good is no more with the seller and is on its way to the buyer. Maybe the good is the courier service, or maybe the good is inside the lorry and on its way to the buyer. So the said seller can still stop the goods from reaching the buyer. Okay? So when can actually a seller exercise this right? Before a seller can do this, the seller have to make sure that the buyer is insolvent, meaning the buyer cannot pay his debts. If the buyer is still solvent, meaning if the buyer can still pay his debts, then the seller does not have this right. Why actually the law gave this right to the seller? This is so that the seller will be given priority over all the other creditors. Why? If this good is being delivered and it reaches the buyer, what will happen? These goods will be auctioned off with all the other goods belonging to the buyer. And then the seller will need to claim according to priority. So of course the secured creditors will be given priority first. And then of course from the proceeds of sales, maybe there is no more balance. Then under that situation, the seller will lose everything. So that's why the law gave this right. How long actually the duration of transit? So once the good is with the carrier, at the time which is being delivered until it arrives to the buyer. That is duration of transit. And then when actually the transit ends, once the transit ends, of course, the seller lost this right. So the transit comes to an end when the buyer takes delivery, of course, from the carrier, or when the buyer obtains delivery, though the said goods has not reached the buyer yet. So let's say that this goods is being sent from England and it has to be sent to Johor Bahru. However, once it reached Port Klang, the buyer went to Port Klang and take delivery and take possession of the said goods. Though it has not reached the buyer yet, since he have taken possession, then under the situation the transit is said to come to an end. Or number 3, if the carrier acknowledges to the buyer, okay, now he acts on behalf of the buyer, then the transit comes to an end. However, if the carrier refuses to deliver, okay, or if the buyer refuses to accept the goods, we said that the transit is still on. So what happens if part of the goods have been delivered and only part have not been delivered? Can the part which have not been delivered is being stopped by the seller? Can, if that part has not been settled yet, the price of that part has not been settled. So how is the procedure to exercise this right of stoppage in transit? The procedure is very simple. Of course, first of all, just take actual possession of the said goods. However, if let's say the seller is in England and now the said goods is on its way to Malaysia and it's in India, how to do this, right? So second one can just give notice to the belly and then to the carrier, and then the carrier need to re-deliver the goods to the seller. However, must bear in mind that the carrier actually also have a right to alienate if his expenses or his commission is not fully settled. So seller need to settle his commission first. his remuneration. And if the goods have already been re-delivered to the seller, what can be done by the seller? Of course, the seller can resell. Sell it to a new buyer, and then if there is damages, can claim damages from the buyer. So, the final remedies is right of seller to resell, hak untuk jual pada orang lain, pihak ketiga, pembeli yang baru. So, right to sell the said goods to new seller, when actually this power of resale is said to exist. When we say power of resale, so meaning now the seller can give good title to this new buyer. Okay, so number one, when the property, meaning the title have not passed to the buyer, to the original buyer. Of course, now the seller can give a good title to the new buyer because since the title have not passed to the original buyer. And secondly, when the seller is in possession of goods. And thirdly, of course, when the seller is exercising his right towards a lien or stoppage in transit. Okay, when then can we say that a seller have a right of resale? Tadi cakap berkenaan kuasa. Bila ada kuasa nak bagi hak milik yang baik kan? Sekarang cakap berkenaan dengan hak. Bila dia ada hak untuk jual ni? So a right of resale can be exercised by a seller. So let's not say that this is not because of lien or maybe not because of stoppage in transit. However, when can we say that this seller have this right, the hak untuk jual pada orang lain? So especially if the goods is of perishable in nature, meaning the goods can easily become rotten. Then under that situation, if let's say the buyer refuse to accept delivery, to take delivery or to accept the goods, then what can be done by the seller? He can sell it to a new buyer because this item can become very rotten easily. Or secondly, when the seller is exercising his rights towards a lien or stoppage in transit, after have given notice to the buyer. And finally, if in the original contract, the seller said he reserved his right, okay, he reserved the right to sell it to other parties, to other buyer if there is default on the part of the buyer. So if there is profit from this resale, then the profit can be kept by the seller. The profit will not go to the buyer. And if there is loss need to be borne by the buyer. So this right of lien or stoppage in transit, which I have discussed with you earlier, continues even if title, okay, even if the buyer have sell or dispose the said goods, okay, however the title is still with the seller. However, the seller will lose this right if the unpaid seller agrees to the subsale by the buyer, or a document of title had already been transferred in the buyer names. Okay, now this is the final topic. This is remedies of the buyer. When actually we said a buyer have remedies, so just now we were discussing about the remedies of the seller. The remedies of the buyer is that what can be done by a buyer if there is a breach of contract on the part of the seller. So a breach of contract because the seller refused to deliver the goods. So the first remedies, this is a normal remedies, the common remedies, damages, ganti rugi, compensation. So if the seller refused to deliver the goods, non-delivery, then of course the buyer can claim damages. How much is the amount of damages? So the amount of damages can be claimed by the seller is the difference between the market price and the price which the buyer bought the said goods. So let's say the buyer wanted to buy this furniture, he managed to bargain and the furniture is being sold to him at 2,000 ringgit. Okay? However, the seller did not deliver the furniture to him and now he is suing for damages. So the market price of the furniture is actually 3,000 ringgit, meaning he can buy the said furniture from other shop. However, the price is 3,000 ringgit. So how much damages the buyer is entitled to claim? 1,000 ringgit, the difference. Okay? Or if there is no market price, how much then? If there is no market price, then we take that what is the foreseeable profit which can be gained by the buyer. So we are going to use the rule inside Hadley versus Benzedine. The loss of profit here, whether the loss of profit is foreseeable or not by the seller. So this loss of profit which is possible, which is foreseeable, that is taken into account as the damages which need to be paid by the seller to the buyer. So that is the damages entitled to be claimed by a buyer. However, if the buyer had already paid for the price of the goods, then of course the buyer can sue for the refund of the price plus damages plus interest. Okay. And secondly, what is the remedies which is entitled to be claimed by a buyer? This is specific performance, whereby the buyer is going to force the seller to deliver the goods to him, to the buyer. This is only available if it involves specific goods or ascertained goods only. If the goods is unascertained, then of course a buyer cannot ask for specific performance. Specific performance is only for specific and ascertained goods. And number 3, this is action in tort. This when the property had passed to the buyer and then what is been done by the seller? Seller wrongfully sell it to other parties. So meaning can claim for wrongful conversion under tort. Okay, memindah milikkan secara salah bawah undang-undang tort. Number 4, when there is breach of warranty and breach of condition, which I have discussed with you just now, the 8 implied terms. So under the situation, if this is breach of warranty or breach of condition, meaning the goods does not measure up to the description of standard, either can claim damages or claim for a refund of the money and rescind the contract if this is a breach of condition. And finally, the last one, number 5, if the seller choose to exercise their right under section 62, meaning they choose the to use the exemption clause, meaning now the buyer cannot claim under the 8 terms under the Sale of Goods Act. Don't worry, the buyer can still go to this consumer tribunal, and this consumer tribunal is being provided under the Consumer Protection Act. It's just that under this Consumer Protection Act, it only covers domestic goods. Domestic goods are the goods which is being used for personal goods, goods which is used for household needs only. Okay, so meaning if these goods involved in industry, then under that situation, the buyer cannot resort to these remedies. Okay, so that's all under this topic of sale of goods. And if there is anything you feel you wanted to ask me, you can do that and post it to me. Thank you, student.